Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel. Today, I thought I'd do something a little bit different here. I'm going to be choosing the best and worst song from every Iron Maiden studio album. We're going to go in order here, so let's get things started here with the debut from 1980, self-titled Iron Maiden. The best song from this record, it's got to be Phantom of the Opera, in my opinion. The first ever Iron Maiden epic, and this is one of those songs that's absolutely crucial to the Iron Maiden catalog and really establishing the signature Iron Maiden sound. And Steve Harris's bass is, of course, super prominent, but you also have some great guitar harmonies here as well. And it's arguably one of the best songs of the Di'Anno era. I mean, it just has it all, from the sound, the tone, the tempo changes, and dueling guitars. It's all there. And as for the worst song from Iron Maiden, this is very difficult. I'm hating this already because I don't have a least favorite from their debut album. It's fantastic, I mean, a lot of these albums, I don't have a worst or a least favorite off the top of my head, but if I had to pick on this track listing here, I'm going to have to go with Strange World. I think it has some great vocals by Paul Di'Anno, and both of the solos on this track are great, which, I feel like I have to nitpick here, which if I didn't nitpick, there wouldn't be much, of a list to choose from of least favorite songs, but, I feel like at its worst, it fulfills the same duties as Remember Tomorrow does on the same album, and I'm not calling it a poor man's Remember Tomorrow, but it just does the same thing and not as good. Moving on to Killers from 1981, their great sophomore album here. Best song on this record, I'm going to go with the title track, Killers, one of my all-time favorite Paul Di'Anno songs here. Such a menacing vibe and atmosphere to this title track, and Paul's delivery is perfect, I think it's a great blend of Paul Di'Anno's almost punk rock voice and the band's more proggy sound they continue to delve deeper into on their sophomore release. Just an awesome track, and in my opinion, it's one of the few Iron Maiden tracks, from the first two albums that I think Paul Di'Anno did consistently better live than Bruce Dickinson. And as for the worst on this album here, I'm going to go with Ides of March. I almost didn't include it since, it kind of leads into Wrathchild, right? But again, I'm nitpicking. I don't think the album needed two instrumentals on it, and the Ides of March definitely isn't as strong as Genghis Khan. Its place on the album, I think, almost feels a bit unnecessary. I almost feel like the album would have started better if they just would have gone straight into Wrathchild instead. Following that up now with the first album with Bruce Dickinson on lead vocals, of course, I'm talking about Number of the Beast. Best song from this album, it's gotta be Hallowed Be Thy Name. It's the best metal song ever written, in my opinion, and I know that might be a bold claim because some people might say Painkiller by Judas Priest, some might say War Pigs, some might say Master of Puppets, or even Holy Wars, but for me, nothing tops the epicness of Hallowed Be Thy Name, and maybe an unpopular opinion, but I much more prefer the live recordings of this track from before Maiden were a guitar trio when it was just Adrian and Dave there. I think adding a third guitar to this song just kind of makes it sound a bit congested compared to how crystal clear it sounds, with just the two dueling guitars. But either way, it is the one song I look forward to hearing most in the Iron Maiden live set. When I go to an Iron Maiden concert, it's their live highlight, in my opinion. Was not in the set list for the Future Past tour, so that was a major bummer, but I'm really hoping it comes back for the new tour this year. When choosing a worst on Number of the Beast, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to go with one from the 1998 remaster that's not on the original. Of course, I'm talking about Total Eclipse from the 98 remaster, which is the copy that I happen to own, and it's a little bit cheating, but also not really, but I just feel like I didn't want to choose Gangland or Invaders because I think those are two tracks that catch way too much flack and deserve some more love, and Total Eclipse is a fine song as well, but I don't really think they needed to add it in on the remaster. I don't think it adds much to the album that Number of the Beast doesn't already have. Moving on to Peace of Mind from 1983, the first Maiden album with Nicko McBrain on the drums. And when it comes to, picking a best and a worst from this record, this was one of the hardest albums to choose, a favorite and a least favorite. But ultimately, for the best song, I'm going to go with To Tame a Land. Great album closer, very underrated stuff here from Peace of Mind. This was, like I said, one of the hardest to choose from. But, Tame a Land has always stood out to me. Probably one of the best bridges the band have ever written. And, I mean, the whole instrumental second half is, some of the finest music the band have ever recorded, in my opinion. And it also, of course, began the trend of Maiden consistently closing their albums out with epics, which, of course, they'd carry on for most of their catalog. And the worst from Peace of Mind, I guess it's got to be Quest for Fire, right? I mean, it's the closest Iron Maiden ever came to Spinal Tap. I mean, listening to this song, I'm expecting an 18-inch Stonehenge to start dropping any minute. But, it's a harmless, fun, cheesy song set in a time when dinosaurs ruled the earth, as Bruce Dickinson so eloquently puts it. And, of course, it's not up to par with the rest of Peace of Mind, in my opinion, but still a fun, solid track nonetheless. Best song on 1984's Powerslave has got to be the title track. Awesome song here, and this was, a toss-up between Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Powerslave, but ultimately I'm going to give the edge to the title track here with its chugging riff and signature Maiden gallop, the awesome lyrics and delivery from Bruce as well. This is the band in their peak form without a doubt, and Powerslave is, no pun intended, an absolute powerhouse of a track, and, I was really happy to hear it live on the Book of Souls tour. Wish they'd bring it back. And the worst, gotta go with Lost for Words, Big Aura, and I promise, I don't have anything against instrumentals. I really dig Steve Harris's bass here. It's fine. It's a fine, harmless instrumental track, but I just don't think it contributes much to, such a powerful album that already is full of classics. My favorite song from Somewhere in Time, let's go with Alexander the Great, the awesome album closer here, and the song that Iron Maiden refused to play live for years and years until the last tour, and not sure if they'll ever do it live again, but Alexander the Great was the most overlooked epic in the Iron Maiden catalog by the band themselves for years, and I think I can speak on behalf of Iron Maiden fans everywhere when I say we all know way too much about Alexander the Great, but, the lyrics read like Bruce reciting from a history textbook, but it has such a grandiose, larger-than-life atmosphere to it. Everything about this song is epic, especially the guitar work. Great solos on here from Dave and Adrian. When they finally did do it live, it sounded awesome. I just don't know what took them so long. I really don't want to do this. This is difficult, because I love every song on this album, and this is by far the hardest for me to pick a worst song, so to speak, but I guess if I had to pick one that's my least favorite, the least strong on this album, I guess I'd have to go with Deja Vu, and listen, I have nothing bad to say about this song at all, just that something had to come in last. For 1988's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, I have to go with the title track as my favorite song from this record here. And, I used the words larger than life to describe Alexander the Great earlier, and I think the exact same thing can be said for Seventh Son. Love the harmonies. I love how theatrical it is, too, and the chorus is beyond catchy and memorable. Just a phenomenal track, and you guys know how much I love a good concept album. So this song, really cool lyrics, really crucial to the story told on the record as well. The worst song on Seventh Son of a Seventh Son has got to be Can I Play With Madness. It's a good song, but just so overplayed. Maiden trying to strike a radio hit with this track, definitely the most commercially accessible on Seventh Son, and I probably don't ever need to hear it again, to be perfectly honest with you. I wasn't a huge fan of them performing it on the last tour, and kind of wish they would have swapped it out for something else on this record like Moonchild or Infinite Dreams. Next up is 1990's No Prayer for the Dying, the first Maiden album with Yannick Years on guitar replacing Adrian Smith. This is also my least favorite Maiden album with Bruce Dickinson in the band, and so when it comes to picking a best, that was a little challenging, but for me personally, my favorite song on this record has got to be Holy Smoke. It's not some technical masterclass or a lyrical masterpiece by Maiden, but there's an energetic and catchy track here with a fun lyrics as well, and it's hard not to get into this track. It's pretty infectious, kind of sounds like something that Bruce would have recorded for Tattooed Millionaire around the same time, which would have been an interesting thing, but Holy Smoke is a definite bright spot, I think, which is, like I said before, one of my least favorite Iron Maiden records, so yeah, not easy to choose my favorite from this album, to the least. But picking a worst was pretty easy. I have to go with Public Enema number 1. This song is a big reason why No Prayer is my least favorite Maiden album with Bruce Dickinson. The songwriting seemed to fall off a cliff on this record, and I think it was just the first sign of just how missed Adrian Smith was in the songwriting department. It's just hard to believe this came from the same band who wrote Seventh Son of a Seventh Son a couple years earlier. My favorite song from this record here, gotta go with the opener, Be Quick or Be Dead. Probably the thrashiest song in the Maiden catalog. I think it makes for, a great high-octane album opener. I think a lot of people would probably choose, the title track as their favorite from this record, but I just feel like that song has been played to death, and I'd much rather listen to Be Quick or Be Dead at this point. It's heavy, it's thrashy, and I think it makes for a killer live set opener if they bring it back for the Run for Your Lives tour. And the worst song on this album, not just the worst song on this record, but in my opinion, the worst Iron Maiden song of all time, has got to be Weekend Warrior. I mean, Iron Maiden went from writing about ancient Egypt and Alexander the Great and all that great conceptual stuff on Seventh Son to writing about soccer on Weekend Warrior. And I just don't know about you, but I definitely don't want to hear about soccer when I'm listening to Iron Maiden, But, it's hardly Steve Harris's best moment as a lyricist here. Definitely the worst song on this record, and some of the cheesiest lyric in the Maiden catalog. And so for me, this is a song that personifies just how weak the songwriting was at this point in their careers. Time for the X Factor from 1995. This album, the first with Blaze Bayley on lead vocals here, replacing Bruce Dickinson. And for me personally, my favorite song here has got to be Blood on the World's Hands. Very underrated cut here from the X Factor. And it seems like only 3 or 4 songs from the Blaze Bayley era get any attention from the band, since the reunion with Bruce. And it's a shame because while those 2 records, Virtual 11 and the X Factor, are not top shelf Iron Maiden, they have some absolute gems on them for sure. And Blood on the World's Hands is one of them, no doubt. It plays really into the more dark and brooding vibe of the X Factor, which I think is a double-edged sword for that record, but it works perfectly here, and I think it's a track that plays into Blaze Bayley's strengths really well. Yeah, so about that double-edged sword thing on the X Factor, the dark and moody stuff, it works on parts of the record, but then you have some really depressing and deflating material like my least favorite here, 2 AM, which just sink this album like a rock and can make it tough to listen through, without getting bored. And the X Factor is an album that definitely could have benefited from, a few songs being cut. And while I can appreciate the fact that this track features some of Steve Harris's, most introspective lyrics, I'd probably start with this one being left on the cutting room floor from the X Factor, 2 AM, one of my least favorites. Virtual 11, the final album with Blaze Bayley on lead vocals here. My favorite song's got to be The Klansman. Bruce has kind of made this song his own over the years, but the original with Blaze Bayley is fantastic as well. Steve Harris watched Braveheart and decided to turn out an epic and one of the more popular songs from the Blaze Bayley era. It's a song that's meant to be played live. It's a great sing-along as well. And Virtual 11 has some really great ideas and some that are just kind of plain overindulgent, but this track kind of offers the best of both. Speaking of overindulgent, the worst on this record has got to be Angel and the Gambler. Such a repetitive song, and to think, if the band just trimmed about 4 minutes off of the chorus of this song, it probably wouldn't have this spot, but, it just goes on and on and on. It just seems like it's never ending, and it can be a chore to listen to. The chorus is grating after a while, and those are all things that you just never hear me say about an Iron Maiden song. 2000's Brave New World, the reunion album with Adrian Smith and Bruce Dickinson. My favorite song on here, going to go with Dream of Mirrors, the forgotten masterpiece from Brave New World, and the song I believe was originally written with Blaze Bayley's vocals in mind, which I can definitely hear in my head. And, it works so much better, though, with Bruce on vocals, and the version from Rock in Rio is an all-timer for sure. My least favorite from Brave New World has got to be The Nomad. It's a really solid, heavy song, but at the same time, it unnecessarily clocks in at 9 minutes long, and they definitely could have shaved a few minutes off of this track, and it would have gone a long way, in my opinion. And although I like the Nomad, it just kind of feels like this clunky, bloated, forced epic right in the middle of the album. On to 2003's Dance of Death. I'm going to go with Passchendaele as my favorite song from this record, and every time I mention Passchendaele on the channel, I have to reiterate, why is this song not in every Iron Maiden set list? I don't get it. It definitely should be. It feels like it was written to be played live, and the version from Death on the Road is absolutely killer. Written by Adrian Smith, it's an interesting contrast in atmosphere compared to the other songs he's written solely on his own, and hands down my favorite from Dance of Death, and in my top 5 favorite Maiden songs from the reunion era as well. Dance of Death is a great album, but when you look at the track listing, you're reminded of just how many songs on here aren't all that memorable on their own, and so with that in mind, my least favorite here has got to be Gates of Tomorrow. It's for me the least memorable song on this album, and not one that I go back to all that much. Not a bad song, but I hate to use the F word here. It just kind of strikes me as album filler more than anything else. Let's talk my favorite Iron Maiden album of all time, A Matter of Life and Death. Love this album. This great record. The best song on here, in my opinion, is got to be my personal favorite Iron Maiden song of all time, that being Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. And really all of this album is great, but I just love the heavy riffs on this track and the lyrics as well. It's another one of those epic Maiden tracks that builds and builds, and I wish the A Matter of Life and Death stuff would have gotten a better reception from Maiden fans when they played the album live in its entirety back in 2007, but it kind of got, killed thanks to the Play Classics crowd, and that's unfortunate because a lot of these songs I think were meant to be performed live, and Brighter Than a Thousand Suns is one that I'd love to hear live, in person. If they ever bring it back, I would absolutely love it. It's definitely on my wish list, but don't think that'll ever happen, unfortunately. Choosing the worst song on my favorite Maiden album of all time was next to impossible, but I guess it would have to be The Pilgrim. It doesn't have the same epic feel compared to Brighter Than a Thousand Suns or Benjamin Brigg or For the Greater Good of God, but it's still a great song with some really, some of the best drumming on this record, but ultimately the weakest if I had to choose. 2010's Final Frontier, my favorite song here has got to be When the Wild Wind Blows, and I always wondered if the title of this track was inspired by The Way the Wild Wind Blows by UFO, which, knowing Steve Harris, it probably was, and Making Contact is a very underrated UFO album, by the way, but anyway, this is such a great way to close out Final Frontier. The lyrics are awesome, really some of the best on the album as well, and just some really poignant stuff, and it's a track that flies by. It's an epic song at length, but it's done so well that, it does not feel like a super long track. You do not feel bored, or you don't feel like it's a chore to listen to or anything like that, because it's just so well composed. And the worst, how about Isle of Avalon? Here's a song that's just completely buried in the Maiden catalog, and Final Frontier in general is pretty buried in Maiden's back catalog, but Isle of Avalon is probably the most lackluster song on here if I had to choose. Not a favorite of mine. I don't hate it either, because I'm kind of indifferent to this track. I think it works on the album, but as a standalone song, not one I'd go out of my way to listen to. Let's dive into the Book of Souls here. Great double album from 2015, and the 18-minute epic final track here, my favorite on the record, Empire of the Clouds. Bruce Dickinson was battling throat cancer at the time and told someone to call a doctor as soon as he was done recording the vocals for this track, and thankfully it was not the last with Bruce Dickinson, but it's remarkable that he could sound that good and still be dealing with throat cancer. And this song is really Bruce's brainchild. It's so well written and structured. The instrumental portions are great. Again, this is another song that continues to build, and the lyrics are super dramatic and suspenseful, but what else would you suspect from Bruce Dickinson, right? One of the band's proggiest songs, and like I was saying about When the Wild Wind Blows, so well written that 18 minutes just flies by in no time. And the worst, I love this album. It's a sentimental favorite for me, one of the first Iron Maiden albums I ever bought, but if I had to pick a worst, I guess I'd have to go with Tears of a Clown. Seems a little random for Maiden to write a song about the death of Robin Williams, but once you get past that, it has this great wailing guitar solo from Adrian Smith, and again, it's another fine song, just the weakest on an album full of more complex and drawn-out tracks. Last one here, let's go with their most recent album, Senjutsu, and the best song here, in my opinion, has got to be Hell on Earth. Lyrically, it reminds me a lot of When the Wild Wind Blows, which is a compliment for sure. Steve Harris has a lot of great songwriting moments on this record, which, Senjutsu in general, I think will go down as one of the more underrated albums of the post-reunion era when all is said and done, but Hell on Earth does a great job of building throughout, and, Bruce's vocal delivery is so poignant and intense, and I wish it had more than one chorus, but my god, is that one chorus so catchy. Lastly, the worst song on Senjutsu has got to be Lost in a Lost World. Definitely the most underwhelming song on this record, in my opinion. I thought it was lyrically a little bit strange for Maiden, too, and I think Disc 2 of Senjutsu is much stronger than Disc 1, and this song just feels a little bit forced and a bit odd for the band to be recording within the confines of this record, and I never really took to it outside of the initial hype when the album came out, and I soured on it pretty quickly. So that wraps up this video here, taking a look at the best and worst, or should I say more appropriately, my least favorite and favorite song from each Iron Maiden album from their debut all the way through Senjutsu. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you don't miss a new upload, and let me know down in the comment section what are some of your favorite and least favorite tracks from each Iron Maiden album. I want to hear from you. And are there any other bands you'd like to see me do this little exercise with, going through their catalog, picking the best and worst song from each album, because this is a lot of fun. And, now I've done pretty much everything there is to do to the Iron Maiden catalog. I ranked their albums, I ranked all their songs, which was a lot. I ranked all their live albums, and now I picked the best and worst from each album. So if there are any other bands you'd like to see me do this exercise with, I'd love to, give it a try, because this, again, was a lot of fun to do, and a little bit different here on the channel, so I hope you guys enjoyed it and had as much fun with it as I did, although some of these albums were pretty difficult to choose from, but thought it would be fun to change things up here a bit on the channel today, and so please let me know if there are any suggestions or any bands you'd like to see me do this with in the future. I'd love to hear it, and until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.